So over the past 2 days, we've heard that call for collective action to focus on the marginalised and address the gender parity in secondary education. We know how quality education can change a girl's life and that of her family and that of her community. How can we then give them that at a time when only 38% of countries have achieved that parity? This penultimate plenary will showcase UNESCO's Global Partnership for Girls and Women's Education. It was launched in 2011, and its aim is to keep girls in school, scale up literacy and skills programs. So we're going to hear from those involved, hopefully encourage more of you to join the partnership and to get involved and help bridge that gap. I'm going to ask Irina Bokova to start by telling us more about the partnership, and then we're going to excuse her because she has a plane to catch. So we'll allow you to get up once I've just asked you to sort of set the scene for us, Irina, in terms of the partnership and who's come on board and what you hope to achieve with it in the future. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you for organizing this so important panel. You mentioned some of the figures and some of the challenges. I'm tempted to add a little bit more on this because sometimes the figures are indeed shocking. We all know that there are 31 million girls out of school. We know that 2/3 of the illiterate people who are 775 million in the world are women. We know the 60% of the countries only 60% of the countries have achieved gender parity in primary education, in 38 in secondary education. And we mentioned these days that if the current trends are preserved, we will achieve gender parity in education, in primary education, only in the year 2086. And we know that despite all the progress, all the advances, challenges are huge. And young women, in many cases, are left behind. So we speak about the learning crisis. We believe this is a teaching crisis. It is a developmental crisis in many parts of the world. We know and we are convinced that girls' education is a basic human right, but it is also a game changer for health, for the prevention of HIV/AIDS, for productivity, for income generation, and for sustainable development. And that is why we are more than convinced that girls' education is one of the most powerful factors, transformative factors of achieving sustainable development. We at UNESCO launched in 2011 Global Partnership for Girls and Women's Education to target the weakest link in education, the transition to secondary education, from primary to secondary for girls, and literacy. Because we believe that this is in response to this widening gap, that girls and women constitute still the majority of out-of-school children, the illiterate adults, the dropouts after primary education, and this also results in chronic discrimination, in chronic poverty, in biased attitudes, and also vulnerabilities for these millions of girls. So what has to be done? We have to attract and retain girls in schools. We have to change education systems and learning environments. We have to become more responsive to girls' education by, I would say, being more careful about their physical and psychosocial needs. Since 2010, within this partnership, we have established a very dynamic collaboration with many private sectors and all across the world, in Africa, in Asia. We have more than 10 different partners. Of course, first and foremost, I want to mention James Foundation, but we also have a more recent, I would say, like Hainan Airlines Group. We have Mobilink, we have UN Women, we have Packet Foundation, and we have worked all across the world. What we seek, in fact, in this important area, we seek to increase the number and diversity of our partners. We want to expand the geographic coverage of our activities, and we have to increase the amount of resources invested. We have to promote innovative approaches. We have to encourage South-South cooperation. And of course, we want to encourage the donor community, the development community, to invest more in education. And also, we are very much encouraged that all across the world, and even in very challenging environments, governments are coming with very targeted strategies for girls' education. In this particular case, because I have on my left side a very respected and very, I would say, a highly valued Minister of Education from Pakistan, a country that I visited last month, Mr. Rahman, with whom we are working on girls' education. We just launched a month ago a Malala Fund for girls' education in some of the remote rural areas of Pakistan. And I know how much the minister also and the government is committed to promoting girls' education. I know how much the education community is committed to working with the local communities, with traditional leaders, with religious leaders, with the civil society. My appeal to all of you, and I just spoke with the private sector when we launched the Business Backs Education campaign. We have launched the Malala Fund for 7 million, and then we will add more resources. But we believe this is just the beginning of a journey, of challenging environment in Pakistan for girls' education. And I appeal to our partners, to governments, to the donor community, to the private sector also, to come and work with us so that we make a success out of this Malala Fund, that we make a success story out of this challenging environment. And we all know, and I have met also while in Pakistan, other also young boys and girls. We know that it is not only Malala who became a symbol, a courageous girl, who became a symbol of the quest for education, of a desire, of a thirst for knowledge and for education and for self-fulfillment. And I can assure you that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of such girls, courageous girls and boys who are going to schools, who are defending their rights to education, who are convincing their communities, and who are convincing also reaching out to the others in order to make girls' education a reality. This is the best way to break the circle of poverty, to eradicate extreme poverty. And I insist on this. If the international community is putting as an objective to eradicate extreme poverty by the year 2030, which I believe will be very much the decision next year, 2015, of the General Assembly of the United Nations, when we will adopt the future Sustainable Development Goals, the agenda of the Sustainable Development, and this will be the target. It cannot be achieved without investing in girls' education. This is the game changer in the 21st century. This is the best, I would say, setting for achieving empowerment, for achieving sustainable development in this world, of sustainable communities, of healthy families, and more economic growth and social inclusion. So my appeal indeed that out of this global forum on teaching and skills, we come with a very strong message of girls' education, of investing in girls' education, and enlarging private-public partnerships in this so important area.
Irina Bokova, thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed.
And I have to apologize, the plane is there.
We will let you get your plane, but thank you for outlining the problems so very clearly. And I think because we've started Pakistan, Honourable Minister, I think we will turn to you because those figures are stark. And the majority, as I understand it, of the 5 million children who are out of school in Pakistan, the majority of them are girls. You intend to reduce that figure. We've heard the partnership issues. How else do you intend to reduce the number of girls who are out of school? Irina, please feel free to leave. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's very nice to meet you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Kate, for giving me opportunity to explain the plans we have in Pakistan for reducing the number of children who are out of school. It is actually very, very important, and millions of children, actually there are more than 6 million children who are out of school in primary education, and we have one of the highest dropout rates as well. And it turns out that our gender parity index is 0.86 for literacy, and gender parity index is 0.78 for primary net enrollment, which means 10% less girls are in school as compared to boys. So we have prepared a national plan of action which talks extensively of measures to get all these children back into school, to retain them, to increase the quality of the schools, and our primary focus would be on girls. And there are numerous reasons for which the girls are out of school, even though there are certain law and order situations, but that is a very minor part of the whole picture, because in those areas there are other problems. The main, and there are also some cultural taboos, but very little percentage is attributed to those cultural taboos which are preventing especially girls coming to schools. But mainly, if you look at the problem, there are two aspects which are keeping these girls out of school. One is the access issue. Schools are farther away from home. We simply do not have enough schools closer to all the homes, especially in areas which have less density in terms of population, and they're scattered populations, so we can't have school everywhere, and we do not have resources to provide transport to all these localities which are living there. So we have strategies for that, and we want to have a lot more non-formal schools closer to their homes. These are essentially a one-room school which is called a non-formal education system. It's a multi-grade teaching in a single class and by a single teacher. Even though it's not a perfect way or not a perfect way of giving quality education, but still, if we have to choose between the two, either keep these children deprived of education, or to give them education which may not be of the best quality, so we choose for the later option. So that's one of the priorities. And similarly, the second main reason, besides the access issue, is the poverty, extreme poverty. And if the parents have to decide between their children, that if they can afford to send one of their children to schools, it's unfortunately the girls who are left out. And similarly, there are cases in which girls or boys are sent to work in these tender years, and instead of going to school, they end up. So we also have a strategy for that, and we have recently evolved certain direction and the strategy and the plan for that, to have a voucher scheme, and also to have food for these families, in fact, to incentivize them to send their children to school. But at the end of the day, as it was discussed earlier, there are issues with economy and issues with even though economy is showing signs of progress, the issues of lesser taxation, even though we are working progressively on that. The new government of Mr. Nawaz Sharif is working very hard towards that. But we also have lesser allocation of budgets towards education in terms of GDP. So we are also planning on increasing that. So resource constraints are also keeping us going, achieving all the desired outcomes right away, but we are in that direction, and we have increased, and we will be increasing further our resources, and the world is also helping us, especially as the DG just mentioned, and I'm very grateful to UNESCO for accepting Pakistan's offer for this $10 million which Pakistan has contributed. I'm also thankful to Madam DG for making an appeal to all the countries and all the partnerships and all the private sector in the world to chip in more for this noble cause. And this $10 million which has been spared for Malala Fund has two parts to it. One will be spent across the globe for the cause of girls' education, and another part will be spent solely in Pakistan under the supervision and the directions of UNESCO.
And we will thank you very much indeed, Honourable Minister. We will be talking about the other private sector input that we're getting with MobiLink shortly, and Sohaib Ashad, who's sitting on the end there, based in Pakistan. But I wanted to pick up on the issue of the cultural taboos and bring in Your Excellency Reem Al Hashimy. You're the Minister of State for the UAE and Chairperson of Dubai Cares. So What has Dubai Cares learned about how best to address these sort of entrenched cultural stereotypes where girls are concerned?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate, very much. And thank you very much also to the organizers for a particularly stellar forum. Particular thanks to, of course, Sunny Varki and all the team that work so diligently. It's hard to believe that this is only the second year that this forum has been in place. It seems like you have a remarkable reputation for decades, and inshallah, decades to come. I think one of the important aspects for us in Dubai Cares when it comes to gender equality or cultural sensitivities is that context is everything. If a particular scenario or a particular method of intervention is applicable in one country, it doesn't mean that it's applicable somewhere else. So the way we've intervened in Pakistan, for example, takes into account specific Pakistani idiosyncrasies, which are different from idiosyncrasies with, let's say, the Filipino community, where you have dropout rates amongst girls who need to go into the workforce, whereas it may be access in Pakistan, it's actually employment in Philippines, it's early marriages in Mozambique, for example. So you really need to look at the context of where you're operating in. And then the second point is, gender parity needs to be part of every single program that you do. You cannot say, okay, I'm working on health and nutrition, and I'm also going to build a school. Oh, and here's a separate program that focuses on girls. Across every intervention you have, girls' education needs to be a cornerstone of that intervention. Otherwise, you're dealing with gender parity like checking something off of a box, as opposed to it being a very central factor in changing the community. And we've been privileged now, Dubai Cares is only a couple of years old, but we've been privileged to see how it can be transformative to the community when girls go to school. It really does break the cycle of poverty. It really does generate economic employment and economic benefit. And it begins to also create a very positive impact and a very positive legacy. So I would say that context is everything, that there isn't a cookie-cutter approach to this, and that it needs to stay at the cornerstone of every single intervention.
And where have you had greatest success? Because you deal very much with grassroots campaigns, don't you? So how do you effectively communicate and promote a more positive image of girls and women?
I think we first need to go in and listen to what are the needs of that community, as opposed to sort of coming in with the answer, to sort of go in with the curiosity and the respect of what it is that these communities need. What do the parents need? What do the parent-teacher associations need? Also, what do the local governments need? That type of engagement is necessary for the success of your program and for it to be actually successful way after Dubai Cares is around. We need to have that internal endorsement and stakeholdership. That's very critical. So I think you first go in to educate yourself. You go in to learn. And after you have that process, then you share together what you think would be a suitable intervention, and you wait for their feedback. Once you have that in place, then you have to have very strict monitoring and evaluation metrics, so that 3 months in, 6 months in, a year, 18 months down the line, you judge against that and say, has that been a successful intervention? Can we replicate it in other communities of a similar culture, or do we need to reshape and redesign that program?
Very interesting. So Sahab Ashad, you are working on the ground in a very practical way to reach some of those girls that we've just been hearing the Minister talk about in those remote locations. Your SMS campaign, MobiLink's SMS campaign, tell us a little bit about that and what success you've had and how you've been measuring the success, because it's been in play for a few years now.
Thank you very much. SMS-based literacy program.
Sorry, I think you need to bring your microphone maybe a bit closer. Yeah.
Any better? SMS-based literacy program was started as a simple unidirectional information-based text messaging service. Over the past 4 years, with the help of our partners, including UNESCO and local NGOs, we have been able to transform it into an interactive classroom handset hybrid that now reaches out to over 6,000 females across the rural belts in Pakistan. The project is formed around a simple yet very strong technological framework which works in parallel with on-ground, culturally sensitive social mobilization. As a technical facilitator, MobiLink has been able to support the project by innovating and personalizing the education delivery, and by offering outreach in those geographical enclaves where the traditional conventional education regimes have struggled. The project, however, does not intend to replicate or doesn't prevent an alternative to the conventional schools, but in various ways serves to strengthen the existing systems.
So forgive me, and for people who maybe aren't aware specifically of the practicalities of it, what do you actually, the SMS campaign, it's sort of text-based learning, what does that mean in practice? Do you literally go out and find those girls in the remote areas and give them the equipment they need, and then what happens?
Sure. In the project areas of implementation, the principal impediment to education has been the centuries-old socio-cultural inhibitions. The stakeholders appreciated that right at the beginning and conducted rigorous on-ground mobilization that helped us understand what will work and what perhaps won't work. The task at hand then was to put together a curriculum that is as effective as it is cognizant of the cultural no-goes. This was achieved with the help of the local government partners as well as UNESCO's education experts. In order for us to access these women who do not unnecessarily step out of the premises of their household and to hand them over mobile phones, it was necessary for us to win the blessings of their male guardians. Now, that is where the local NGOs came in, and they helped us relay the communal and domestic benefits of basic literacy to these households. Once we had the local buy-in, setting up small-sized, unconventional classrooms at the village elderly place wasn't a problem. Females would get together for a couple of hours every morning for basic literacy lessons, and were also familiarized with mobile phone usage. Once they were home, they would receive information-based text messages and were also assessed via MCQs, again, on their handsets. Responses are logged, recorded, and are assessed to evaluate the individual's learning curve. Cellular connectivity has also allowed us to monitor the project's progress at the center as we go.
Thank you. Well, Joanna, just picking up on that, because you're also working for the, on behalf of the Earth Institute, you've got your Connect to Learn initiative, so another grassroots campaign working mainly in Africa.
Yes, we have the opportunity to work in 10 poor countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and the project is called Millennium Villages. It reaches 500,000 people across 14 different sites. And it's proof of concept that one can achieve the Millennium Development Goals by having an integrated approach to development and investing in education, in agriculture, in health, in infrastructure, and thinking about how to bring innovation into those settings. The project is possible in education for us thanks to Ericsson that is bringing connectivity to these sites. There is no real business case for Ericsson to get into those remote places. But by bringing connectivity and working with local providers, both Ericsson and we have been able, as Columbia University, to really experiment what it means to bring this new enabling technology into those poor settings and see its impact on access to markets, access to healthcare, and of course access to education. And that's how we started bringing initially connectivity into the schools. And MDG on education is really access to primary education. It doesn't talk about secondary education. And we were very proud that we finally had girls graduating from primary schools and being able to go to secondary schools. And that's where we suddenly noticed, no, they cannot go because there are no secondary schools in those settings. And unless there is funding for scholarships for these girls, they will never be able to leave the villages. And that's where we partnered again with Ericsson and decided that, yes, we will raise funds, and that's the Millennium Promise, the NGO, for the scholarships. We, as Columbia University, will work on our side on developing curriculum, developing models of delivery of education in those settings, and working directly in governmental schools with the government. And then Ericsson, as technology partner, will bring new solutions that will be cost-effective, that will be respectful of what these settings have as technology. So it's not bringing Rolls-Royce into those settings. It's really learning by doing. And I think Minister Reem Al Hashimy said also, when you are engaged on the ground, you have the unique opportunity to learn what works in the local community, what are the needs, and you also discover various bottlenecks that you don't see necessarily if you are sitting, in Stockholm for Ericsson or for us in New York. So it has been a fantastic experience, and the goal for us is to ensure that by taking advantage of the enabling technology that is going to be actually everywhere, even in remote Africa's villages in the next couple of years, how do we take advantage of that to scale up access to secondary education for girls? And by mobilizing resources for the scholarships to make it actually possible for the girls to go to school. And then how is that model scalable? And I think what we are doing is not more to have a project where we have well-defined target group and we just want to prove something and write a nice paper about it. We really want to scale it up, and it's happening already now, where Ericsson is deploying the same technical solution. It's a mobile broadband, cloud-based information communications technology solution that is cost-effective in other countries. So the project is already being scaled up in Brazil, in Chile, in China. It's going to be scaled up in India. But I think the important piece for us is working in development and having worked for many years on the Millennium Development Goals to realize that the only way to have sustainable development is by investing in girls, in youth. And the best means is by investing in their education.
Lovely, thank you. And that's something, John, that you've been doing. John Davies, Vice President for Intel, because Intel's invested an enormous amount over the past decade. So certainly a project that is sustainable, both in terms of cash donations and also your employees. I understand they've contributed nearly 3 million volunteer hours. So share with us then what you've learned in terms of what makes for a successful project and investment from both perspectives.
I think there's maybe 3 programs to share with the audience. Okay, 3 different programs to share with the audience. Number 1 is the awareness side of it. We're a big company, we have a decent brand, and we reach a lot of people. So what we did is we joined with 1010, UNESCO, and we made on awareness a movie called Girl Rising. This is so you could take the stories of those 4 girls that spoke 2 nights ago at the introduction, and did this with 9 different girls in 9 different countries. It's exactly the same story, but not reach an audience like this room, to reach an audience of millions and millions. It's a film. I've seen this in Sonoma, California, where I live. You could download it if you haven't seen it on iTunes or Amazon. You can share this with your friends. So it really gets the bulk awareness. That's one. The second is we have lots of IT programs and technology programs that we think there's been far more boys engaged in this than girls. And so we have programs like She Will Connect, She Will Code, that are aimed specifically at girls to bring more and more of them into the connection and the coding. We run computer clubhouses, and in those computer clubhouses, they've typically been boys and young men that have run these. Put more girls in running them. Make sure the content isn't just gaming in there, but it's more relevant to the girls. Probably the one that's the most interesting for this audience is where you reach the millions and millions and millions. And we have programs like Intel Teach that touches 12 million teachers, has been through this over the last 12 years. And because we have big programs that people love, you can kind of set the rules of the game and make those to encourage equality among them. And maybe the most interesting one is everyone here of this has talked about science and engineering, STEM. There's not enough girls in STEM. So we've had a program called GESF, which is our Science and Engineering Foundation. It's a contest for students. It gets done in provinces or regions. It then gets done at country level. The winners go to the US and collect prizes. And there's many millions of dollars of prizes and scholarships here. Well, this program has been, and it's for 16, 17-year-olds pre-university. So it's the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medical. And since 1999, so that's 15 years, 46% of the participants in this have been girls. And that's a much bigger number than you'd see since 1999. And let me calibrate you. In the year 2012, 7 million students around the world was in this. That means 3.5 million girls were actually doing contests in science and technology and mathematics and medical to compete for prizes pre-university. And that's a kind of way of encouraging them. And the way we was able to do this is that program has been around since 1999. We've committed funds through this through 2019, so the governments know they're going to be there, and they know they can keep promoting these programs and having the contests in their countries. But at 50% goals, because it's successful programs, you ask for guidelines. It should be boys and girls, similar and equal numbers. And I think that's one of the lenses we can look at this through. We all have big programs in the room. You will reach many, many people. Put the lens on it and say, let's reach as many girls as boys in these types of programs around education. And if enough of us do that, I think that will help the problem tremendously.
Rebecca, you're obviously nodding at that. It'd be lovely. Have you all been collaborating and sort of sharing ideas over the last sort of 2 days, and how, you know, the scale of your projects can perhaps help some of the more grassroots campaigns?
Yeah, we do. We have many, many partners in here, and I spend a lot of time going to conferences and events and talking about these, as does our corporate affairs team that runs many of these programs. And we've been having the conversations about how we can do more of this. One of our biggest partners in this is UNESCO. The Girl Rising film, UNESCO is a founding partner of that. We do, there's a toolkit here that talks about how you go to a government and have a toolkits and a workshops for girls. Well, guess what? There's our name there, there's UNESCO's name there, other industry names there that are all trying to take this to different people out there in the countries. And so it's got to be done with partners, and it's got to be done with as many of your partners as you can. And again, if we put that equality lens on it and almost guidelines, sometimes almost rules for being in the program, it's going to make a huge, huge difference.
Brilliant, thank you very much. You might need your translation guides at this stage, because I want to bring Mr. Lee in. Speaking of partners, as Executive President of H&A Group, tell us why you chose to support the partnership. You've committed $5 million US.
Thank you, Kate. I've forgotten English a lot, so I think I need an interpreter. 我来自中国的海南岛海航集团。海航呢，从成立20年以来，一直在从事着社会捐助和慈善事业。我们过去呢，在中国曾经捐助了一些希望小学，也曾经捐助了一些医疗队的资助了医疗队的活动。我们在中国的西藏、甘肃、青海，去为那些牧民做白内障手术和角膜移植，所以我们也捐助了医疗队去非洲、莫桑比克和津巴布韦等等国家。我们也希望以后能有更多的机会参与更多的社会的捐助活动。那么，我们这次在今年的2月份跟联合国教科文组织合作，签了一个5年的捐助500万美元的教育方面的活动。我们也希望通过这样的活动，能够带动更多的中国的民营企业参与这种社会公益活动。在中国2000年以前，中国有个非常出名的教育家孔子，他有3000个学生，但没有一个是女性。也就是说，在中国呢，至少到我母亲那一代，她出生在上个世纪的1924年，她只读过小学，我爸爸读过大学，所以家里一切的事儿都是我父亲说了算。到了我这一代，我们家都是我夫人说了算。所以我想起英国人培根说过一句话，叫"知识就是力量"。我相信，除了男人受教育懂得越来越尊重女性以外，女性的力量也来自于她们受教育的程度。所以在中国，有更多的人们越来越关注儿童教育，尤其是女童的教育。中国人现在在教育方面，大家都知道，中国有一个家庭生育政策，每个家庭只能有1个孩子，为了控制人口，所以中国人在教育的方面的投入非常大，有的家庭达到家庭总收入1/3。也就是说，中国的人受教育和关注教育的程度，自古以来，随着思想观念的突破，越来越希望有更多的人受到良好的教育，尤其是女性和女童。所以我们就是基于这一点，我们希望在我们过去 自己捐助的同时，我们希望有更多的机会参与像联合国教科文组织这样的有系统的，能够使我们的项目的影响力更大、更有影响力，能够影响到中国更多的民营企业参与这样的捐助。至于说有什么样的结果，我更相信像联合国教科文组织这样的机构，有丰富的经验和多年的运作团队，会把每一个我们参与的项目都做得更好。最后呢，我也希望我们能够在这个5年计划得到执行以后，我们会跟联合国教科文组织考虑一个新的下一阶段的合作计划。谢谢主持人。
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And on one of those points you made, Honourable Minister Mohammed Balago Rehman, about women being in charge, really, behind closed doors. I understand you have 5 children, 3 of whom are girls. So what advice do they give you about what needs to be done in Pakistan to get more girls into education? And because we are tight for time, so I'm going to just put 2 questions in, if I may. There are some success stories that I know you'd like to share with us. So firstly, your daughters and what advice they give you, and do you take it? And secondly, the success stories where you are seeing girls overtake the boys in education.
Yes, thank you, Kate. In Pakistan, we have, those people who are, have the access to education and where the families are very pro-girl education, and so it's not a problem at all. And in fact, we see there are many girls and women who are really making success stories. And even in my home, my girls are very good in education, and they have shown remarkable results. And they always encourage me to work towards having more girls into school. And referring to the success stories in the society as a general, in Pakistan we have a big number of parliamentarians who are women, and as compared to many other countries, it's a much higher figure. We have had a woman prime minister, which was first in the Islamic world, and many countries in the world as of today haven't had any woman prime minister or premier. We have had woman speaker. We have a mountaineer who is a woman, and she has set many world records. And now we have a fighter pilot in Pakistan who's a woman, and actually Aisha comes from my own home city, which is Bahawalpur, a city in southern Punjab. Besides that, in education, when we, especially in higher education, in tertiary education, we have a higher number of women going to pursue, which are in colleges and universities, and especially to talk of medical colleges and medical in the field of medicine, we see that percentage of girls in public sector universities and medical colleges is more than 70%. Wow. It averages around 73%. And at times, on the lighter side, we find boys and men asking government to have a special quota for them because they're the ones who are being deprived there. Well, all those who come into education, and they are working very practically in the society. We have many business women owners and executives, and in all fields of life they're working now.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And Your Excellency, Reem Al Hashimy, perhaps I can ask you to leave us with a final thought for anybody here today still debating whether we need to be focusing on the marginalized, specifically on women and girls. What final thought would you leave?
I would probably say that if you think you're working on an educational program, but women are not part of it, or girls are not part of it, you're not really working on an educational program. It really does sit at the center stone of advancing a community, building sustainable development. Unless girls are going to school, the cycle of poverty will never, ever, ever be broken in any given society. But I'd also like to add the importance of quality, Kate. I think one statistics that wasn't mentioned in today's panel but may have been mentioned earlier on is that you have 200 million children in school, but they're not learning anything. So the quality of education actually really does matter. Otherwise, it's somewhat misleading because you have kids in school, but after several years, they don't know basic numeracy, they don't know basic literacy, so what's the point of them being in school? Now, that quality factor is a critical component, I think, of a strong educational system. And like I said, unless girls are alongside boys in that program, then I wouldn't even consider it really a strong educational program at all.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very good note to end on. Thank you to all of our panel for your insights and your input, and I wish you every success over the coming years. Thank you very much indeed.